In today's video, we're diving into the truly disturbing. Our list highlights the most spine-chilling historical disasters and bizarre events that could easily pass as the plot of a horror movie. So, with everything from the most haunting ghost ship ever recorded to the brutal reality of living through a plague, here are the 15 creepiest historic events that are scarier than horror movies. Number 15, the tragic tale of Henry Rathbone. Henry Rathbone was more than a bystander to one of America's darkest moments. He was in the room. On April 14, 1865, Rathbone and his fiancée, Clara Harris, joined President Abraham Lincoln at Ford's Theater. When John Wilkes Booth pulled the trigger, Henry instinctively lunged at him. Booth slashed his arm with a dagger, cutting into an artery before leaping off the balcony and escaping. Though Rathbone survived the attack, he carried far more than a scar. The guilt over failing to protect Lincoln gnawed at him for years. His mental health declined sharply. By 1883, the pressure had fractured him. In a horrifying act of delusion, Rathbone murdered Clara and tried to kill himself. He was found in a psychotic state and committed to an asylum in Germany, where he spent the rest of his life. Once a respected war hero, he died forgotten, locked away with ghosts of that Christmas night still whispering through his mind. Number 14, the tale of Octavia Hatcher. Octavia Hatcher's grave in Pikeville, Kentucky isn't just a resting place, it's a symbol of one of the most disturbing burial stories in American history. In 1891, she fell into a coma shortly after childbirth and was pronounced dead. The heat forced a quick burial, but days later, others showed similar symptoms and recovered. Panic set in. Her family exhumed her coffin, and what they found turned rumor into horror. Inside, Octavia's nails were broken and bloodied, the fabric around her shredded. She had been buried alive. Whether she died from suffocation or exhaustion remains unclear, but what's certain is that she woke up underground. Locals still debate how much of the story is folklore, but the grave, with its eerie statue and legend, remains untouched. The case eventually contributed to stricter medical confirmation standards before burial. Octavia didn't just pass away. She became a warning carved in stone, reminding future generations of how easily medicine once mistook sleep for death. Just imagine the pain of her. Number 13. Mysterious knocking in space. When astronaut Yang Liwei launched aboard the Shenzhou 5 in 2003, he didn't expect to hear knocking, yet that's exactly what echoed through his spacecraft. Suspended in Earth's orbit, Yang reported strange, deliberate taps as if someone was just outside the hull. He checked the controls, scanned his surroundings, and even tried replicating the sound once back on Earth. Nothing matched. Engineers later attributed the sounds to pressure shifts on the spacecraft's body, but that didn't change the psychological weight of the moment. Other astronauts across different missions have described similar sounds, even decades apart. While explanations have been proposed, the thought of hearing something knocking from outside, where nothing alive should be, is enough to rattle even the most disciplined minds. In a place as isolated as space, where silence is expected and survival is fragile, any anomaly becomes deeply personal. For Yang, that eerie sound still lingers in his memory, an echo from beyond the void. Number 12. The Curse of King Tut. After Howard Carter uncovered Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the strange deaths that followed gripped the public's imagination. The first to die was Lord Carnarvon, who financed the expedition. He succumbed to blood poisoning from a mosquito bite, just weeks after entering the tomb. Over the years, more members connected to the excavation died under unexplained or sudden circumstances. Carter's secretary, Richard Bethel, was found dead in a London club. Bethel's father soon after committed suicide. Though Carter lived for another 17 years, the pattern of deaths led many to believe that something unnatural had been disturbed. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle even speculated that elemental spirits guarding the tomb had been released. Modern science has tried to dismiss the idea, pointing to mold, bacteria, and coincidence. But the timing and consistency of deaths kept the legend alive. Whether or not the curse was real, it became one of the most unsettling stories tied to archaeology's golden age. Egypt is scary. Number 11. The Tragedy of the Essex. The Essex, a whaling ship out of Nantucket, sailed in 1819 with a seasoned crew and high hopes. That optimism shattered a year later when a massive sperm whale rammed the vessel with terrifying force. The ship broke apart and sank, leaving the survivors adrift in small boats with minimal supplies. As days stretched into weeks, hunger and thirst warped every sense of morality. They consumed whatever they could: rainwater, sea turtles, and eventually their own dead. Cannibalism wasn't a rumor. It was recorded. Some men were sacrificed by drawing lots. Others died naturally and were carved up by starving crewmates. Only 8 of the original 21 made it home. Their ordeal inspired Melville's Moby Dick, but the real Essex was no epic. It was pure survivalism, stripped of heroism. The Pacific had no mercy. What remained were broken men with haunted eyes, drifting through waves that would never forget what desperation turned them into. Number 10. Recycling deceased soldiers. During the Napoleonic Wars, the dead weren't just mourned, they were harvested. With over 2 million casualties, the remains of fallen soldiers became grim resources. Teeth were pulled from corpses and sold to dentists, who crafted them into dentures, famously known as Waterloo teeth. After the flesh rotted away, battlefield bones were collected and ground into powder. This bone dust wasn't discarded. It was packaged and sold as fertilizer, enriching farmlands across Europe. One 1822 British newspaper casually noted its effectiveness, as if the brutality of its source didn't matter. The line between necessity and horror blurred fast. These weren't distant ancient practices. They were part of an industrial system that commodified war remains. Death wasn't the end. It was repurposed. What began as a war tragedy became part of agriculture and the dental trade, a chilling example of how societies can normalize the grotesque when demand outweighs dignity. But let's be real. Will you exchange your old teeth with these new teeth from the dead? Number 9. Wartime pet euthanasia. As World War II began, fear spread quickly across Britain, not just for soldiers, but for animals too. With the country bracing for food shortages and bombing raids, government officials released guidance that urged pet owners to either evacuate their animals or euthanize them. The idea was brutal, but presented as necessary. A surge of pet owners, unsure what the future held, chose to comply. That week alone, an estimated 750,000 pets were killed. Veterinary offices overflowed. Families brought their animals in tears, some not fully understanding the long-term impact of their decision. Pamphlets were distributed recommending a captive bolt pistol as the humane method. The logic was framed around compassion and preparedness, yet the emotional toll was immense. Photos from that time show people standing outside clinics with pets in their arms, eyes full of confusion and guilt. What was meant to prevent suffering created a silent national grief rarely spoken of in history books. All right, guys. Now, let's head over to Number 8. Minnie Dean's Crimes. Minnie Dean's name still sends chills down New Zealand's history. In the late 1800s, she offered a grim service, caring for unwanted babies. Desperate mothers paid her to adopt or raise their kids, often without any questions. But the number of children going missing under her care couldn't be ignored forever. Neighbors whispered. Authorities began watching. When 3 small bodies were found buried in her garden, the truth shattered any illusion. She hadn't been a caregiver, she'd been a killer. Investigators believed she murdered the infants to keep collecting payments without the burden of actually raising them. In 1895, she was convicted and became the only woman ever executed by hanging in New Zealand. Her case led to major overhauls in child welfare laws and adoption regulations. Public reaction was a mix of shock, horror, and outrage. Dean's crimes weren't just heinous. They exposed a broken system and marked one of the darkest chapters in the country's legal past. She was the most brutal woman in history. Number 7. The Stanford Prison Experiment. Stanford's psychology department didn't expect to create chaos. They expected to study it. In 1971, Professor Philip Zimbardo converted a university basement into a fake prison, assigning student volunteers as either guards or inmates. What started as academic research spiraled quickly. Within days, the guards, ordinary students, began enforcing sadistic punishments. Prisoners were stripped, humiliated, and psychologically broken. Zimbardo didn't intervene. In fact, he encouraged it by adopting the role of prison superintendent, blurring his objectivity. The line between simulation and reality collapsed. Several participants had to be removed due to emotional distress. The entire study, planned for 2 weeks, was shut down after just 6 days. Critics later exposed serious flaws. Zimbardo's influence skewed behavior, and participants seemed aware they were acting. But the damage was real. It showed how power can twist behavior when unchecked, and how easily people can become the roles they're given. The Stanford Prison Experiment didn't just test human nature, it exposed its darkest reflexes. Number 6. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. In 2009, John Jones entered Nutty Putty Cave in Utah with his bro and some friends, expecting a routine adventure. The cave was known for its narrow, winding passages, but Jones made a fateful error. He squeezed into a tight chute, thinking it led to a familiar route. It didn't. He got wedged upside down in a crevice barely wide enough for his chest. Trapped and inverted, blood began to pool in his head. Rescue teams responded quickly and tried everything, ropes, pulleys, and even drilling, but the cave's design worked against them. For 28 hours, he remained pinned, conscious, and in pain. His heart couldn't take the strain. He died where he was stuck. The recovery attempt failed. With no safe way to retrieve the body, the cave was sealed permanently. What should have been a short expedition turned into a haunting reminder of how easily nature can overpower even the most experienced. Jones's final resting place remains deep in stone. Number 5. Plague riots and refugees. The Black Death wasn't just a biological catastrophe, it fractured the foundation of European society. Killing off 30 to 60% of the population, it painted cities with fear and left streets eerily silent. In London, desperate attempts to contain the disease turned brutal. Infected families were locked inside their homes, and armed guards were posted outside to enforce the quarantine. These guards weren't just keeping people in, they were sealing their fate. Riots exploded as the sick fought for air and freedom. Entire districts were walled off like plague prisons. Refugees fleeing the cities were rejected by rural towns terrified of contagion. Some were even attacked by mobs or driven back into infected zones. Survival didn't guarantee safety. It often meant wandering, starving, and being treated like a walking corpse. The disease exposed how fear can turn neighbors into enemies and authority into oppression. The plague didn't just kill, it unraveled civilization and stripped away any illusion of order. Number 4. The death of Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre's downfall was as vicious as the revolution he helped ignite. Once hailed as the incorruptible leader of the French Revolution, his obsession with ideological purity led to a reign of terror. On July 27, 1794, his enemies struck first. Robespierre tried to end his life with a pistol, but the shot shattered his jaw instead. Captured with his face in tatters, he was paraded through Paris, unable to speak, his head held together by a blood-soaked bandage. As he lay on the platform of the Place de la Révolution, executioners ripped the cloth from his mouth just before the blade fell. Witnesses say he screamed, not in words, but in agony. The man who sent thousands to the guillotine became its most pitiful victim. His death didn't mark closure. It symbolized the revolution consuming itself. Robespierre died a broken figure. His ideals, once absolute, drowned by paranoia, betrayal, and the weight of power gone unchecked. Number 3. The Hinterkaifeck murders. In 1922, a remote Bavarian farm became the backdrop for one of Germany's most disturbing unsolved crimes. Andreas Gruber noticed footprints in the snow leading to his house, but not away from it. Soon after, the family began hearing strange noises in the attic. No investigation followed. Days later, every member of the household was found murdered. Gruber, his wife, their daughter, grandchildren, and even the maid. Their bodies were discovered stacked and partially buried in the barn, brutally bludgeoned. What shook investigators wasn't just the violence, it was the aftermath. Someone had stayed in the house, feeding livestock, cooking meals, and living among the corpses. No suspect was ever arrested. The murder weapon, believed to be a pickaxe, was later recovered, but no fingerprints, no motive, and no solid leads ever came. The farm was demolished, but the unanswered questions still haunt Germany's cold case files. Hinterkaifeck wasn't just a massacre, it was a methodical disappearance of an entire family. Number 2. The Donner Party. In 1846, a group of hopeful settlers left the Midwest for California, an ambitious journey that would become one of America's most infamous tragedies. Led by George Donner and James Reed, they attempted a shortcut known as the Hastings Cutoff, which instead trapped them in the Sierra Nevada mountains as early snow buried the trail. Stranded, isolated, and running out of food, the group set up camp near what is now Donner Lake. Weeks passed, conditions worsened, death became routine. When starvation peaked, survival took a darker turn. The survivors made a pact: consume the dead or die with them. Some were eaten after passing from cold and hunger. Others, it's believed, were not. By the time a rescue team arrived in February 1847, only 48 of the original 87 remained. The journey meant to promise new life ended with broken spirits, frozen bodies, and a legacy so grim that Donner Party still evokes dread in American memory. Number 1. The Mary Celeste. The Mary Celeste remains one of the most unnerving maritime mysteries in recorded history. Originally built in Nova Scotia and named the Amazon, the ship changed hands after a wreck and was later renamed by American owners. On December 4, 1872, it was found adrift near the Azores, perfectly intact, yet completely deserted. The vessel was seaworthy, its sails set, cargo untouched, and the crew's belongings still on board. But the lifeboat was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no foul weather noted in the log, which itself hadn't been updated in over a week. Speculation swirled. Pirates, mutiny, underwater quakes, or toxic fumes? None of the theories fully explains the eerie calm that surrounded the ship's abandonment. Over 150 years later, the Mary Celeste remains frozen in time, a ghost ship adrift in legend. Its crew vanished into silence, their fate never uncovered. If you've enjoyed watching this video, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you soon in the next one.